For years, a shadow has stretched across the McCullough Ranch, cast not by a fading sun, but by a monstrous bull named Tornado. This isn't just any bull. This is the beast that ripped apart the life of a family, leaving the patriarch, John McCullough, paralyzed and stripping the ranch of its fighting spirit. Now, the bank is closing in, threatening to take the only home the McCulloughs have ever known. But the youngest son, 20-year-old Ethan, refuses to let the legacy die. He has made a vow to climb onto the back of the very beast that broke his father, to ride the impossible and win the rodeo prize money that will save everything. Can one young cowboy conquer the ghost of his past and save his future? Prepare for a story of impossible odds, deep-seated fear, and the ultimate ride for redemption. This isn't just a bull ride. It's a son's final, desperate attempt to reclaim his family's honor and their land, all in a heart-stopping 8 seconds. The vast expanse of the McCullough Ranch, affectionately known as the Iron Star, was a panorama of fading glory. The paint peeled on the main house, the corral sagged, and the once proud herd of cattle had dwindled to a fraction of its former size. At the heart of this quiet decay was the weight of a 5-year-old tragedy. Ethan, barely out of his teens, felt the responsibility for the ranch like a physical ache. His father, John, a man whose presence once commanded the respect of the entire county, was now a silent figure in a wheelchair, the silence amplified by the lingering trauma of the accident. It wasn't just the paralysis. It was the loss of his essence, the cowboy spirit extinguished by one terrifying moment. The bull, Tornado, a massive obsidian beast with a reputation for brutality, had been the instrument of this destruction. The fall at the state rodeo had been brutal, an image replayed endlessly in the nightmares of every McCullough. The ensuing medical bills were biblical, a relentless tide that no amount of good intention could stem. Now, the foreclosure notice, printed on official, cold paper, was the grim sentinel on the kitchen counter. It had an immovable date, a mere 3 weeks away, forcing a crisis point upon the family. Ethan's older sister, Clara, an accountant by training and a caretaker by necessity, held the family finances together by sheer force of will, her youth stolen by ledgers and debt collectors. She championed practicality, urging Ethan to face reality, sell, downsize, save what they could. She feared his idealism, seeing it as a dangerous echo of their father's reckless pride. However, Ethan's gaze was fixed on a more audacious solution. The Grand National Rodeo, held just across the state line, offered a massive, winner-take-all prize purse, enough to wipe their debt clean and inject life back into the Iron Star. Critically, the rodeo featured a final, high-stakes exhibition ride, the Tornado Challenge, featuring the retired, but still legendary bull. The prize for riding the full 8 seconds was a staggering sum, specifically designed to entice the desperate and the foolhardy. Ethan had no intention of selling his birthright to Mr. Harlan, a neighboring rancher whose thinly veiled avarice for the Iron Star made his offers of purchase feel like a vulture circling a dying animal. Harlan, a man with a chillingly opportunistic smile, represented the external pressure, constantly reminding them of their impending failure. Ethan's initial plan, hatched in the quiet desperation of sleepless nights, was a secret that felt both vital and deadly. He knew it was crazy, a direct challenge to the source of his family's pain, but no other solution offered the immediacy and magnitude of the necessary salvation. He began to ride the mechanical bull in the forgotten back corner of the barn, a machine of rusty gears and worn leather pushing it to speeds he had never dared before. This was the start of his dangerous preparation, a solitary quest to confront a legend, driven by the belief that a McCullough was born to ride, even if that meant riding into a storm of his own making. The central conflict was now clearly defined: the Iron Star versus Tornado, with Ethan's life and the family's future hanging in the balance. He was determined to face the beast his father could not beat. Ethan's early training was a raw, bruising affair, exposing the gulf between his skill in bronc riding and the relentless power demanded by the bull. Bronc riding was finesse. Bull riding, especially against a beast like Tornado, was survival through sheer, sustained aggression and perfect balance. His body became a roadmap of contusions and muscle strain. The mechanical bull, his clandestine partner in this madness, was set to mimic the chaotic, unpredictable movements he'd studied in old, grainy footage of Tornado. Each sudden jolt, each violent snap, was a reminder of the crippling risk. Ethan wasn't just training. He was attempting to desensitize himself to a fear that was already part of his DNA, of the fear of the fall that had broken his father. The emotional toll was immense. Every bone-jarring impact was accompanied by a flash of memory. The dust, the crowd's collective gasp, and the sight of his father's still form. This internal conflict, the battle between his cowboy instinct and his traumatic memory, was often his biggest opponent. He developed a slight involuntary flinch when the machine bucked to the left, precisely the area where John had been most vulnerable. Clara's growing suspicion was the first major obstacle. She caught him late one evening, gingerly applying liniment to a heavily bruised ribcage. Her reaction was not anger, but a tired, deep sorrow. "Ethan, please, what are you doing?" "That is enough of a broken reminder. We can't lose you too," she pleaded, her voice cracking with the strain of holding the family together. He offered hollow excuses about working harder on the ranch, but the truth lay in his evasive eyes. Their conflict highlighted the contrasting ways they dealt with their grief. Clara through practicality, Ethan through a dangerous symbolic confrontation. The external pressures escalated dramatically when Mr. Holland appeared at the ranch with a Lauer in tow, a calculated display of predatory legal maneuvering. Harlan didn't raise his offer. Instead, he subtly inquired about the market value of John's antique rodeo gear, a blatant, callous attempt to scout for assets to liquidate post-foreclosure. He even mentioned, with feigned sympathy, the unfortunate incident with the missing cattle and the irrigation failure, suggesting that accidents happen when a rancher is distracted. The insinuation of sabotage, though unspoken, was clear. This aggressive posturing solidified Ethan's decision. Harlan's smug confidence was a powerful fuel. He recognized that this was not merely a financial problem, but a spiritual war for the soul of the Iron Star. The ranch's value was not in its acreage, but in the McCullough name, which Harlan sought to tarnish and erase. Ethan knew that settling for selling a part of the ranch would be a slow, humiliating surrender. His goal shifted from simply earning money to achieving a victory so public and definitive that it would silence Harlan and restore his father's honor. His training now included meticulous studies of bull anatomy and movement patterns, transforming his reckless passion into a calculated, strategic endeavor. He had to be smarter than Tornado and tougher than his own fear. The pivotal moment, the major narrative rev, occurred in the dusty stillness of the old saddle room, a place John hadn't entered since the accident. Ethan was cleaning the old tack, a ritualistic act of coping, when his father wheeled himself in. The air was thick with the scent of old leather and unspoken grief. John, observing his son's single-minded intensity, finally broke his 5-year-long silence with a strained, almost painful whisper. He wasn't talking about the bull's strength, but about his own hubris. "It was the saddle, son. I insisted on it. Old superstition. The latigo was too tight on the offside. Pulled the seat just enough to make me list to the right," John confessed, his eyes fixed on the worn-out piece of gear. "Tornado didn't beat me with power, Ethan. He beat me by exploiting a mistake I refused to correct." This was a seismic shift in Ethan's perspective. For years, Tornado had been an elemental, mythical villain, a purely unstoppable force. The confession humanized the tragedy, placing a portion of the blame on his father's unyielding pride, but also offering a key to the bull's legendary success. Tornado wasn't random chaos. It was a predator that detected and capitalized on the smallest imbalance. The specific detail of the list to the right was the breakthrough. Ethan immediately understood the bull's signature move. A sudden, vicious spin to the left was designed not as a random buck, but as a calculated exploit of the rider's natural counterlean to the right. The bull was a strategist. The emotional impact on Ethan was profound. The crushing guilt he had felt for his father's fate, the silent judgment he carried, eased, replaced by a surge of renewed focus and respect for his father's technical mind. John, now animated by the shared knowledge, began to communicate using an old, beat-up chalkboard, drawing diagrams of bull movement and rider posture. He couldn't speak in full sentences, but his drawings and gestures conveyed the accumulated wisdom of a lifetime in the arena. The saddle, a symbol of their failure, became the focus of their renewed connection. Ethan started modifying his mechanical bull routine, not just focusing on sheer endurance, but on precision. He began to practice an extreme counterlean, consciously forcing his weight to the left when the machine spun that way, teaching his body to defy its natural reaction. It was counterintuitive, painful, and terrifyingly precise. This new, intellectualized training brought them closer. Clara, observing the quiet, intense hours father and son now spent together, felt a slight easing of her worry, even though she still didn't know the full extent of Ethan's dangerous goal. She only saw her brother talking to their father again, and her father responding with purpose. The narrative had moved beyond a simple story of revenge into a high-stakes, technical challenge where the son was using the father's hard-won, devastating wisdom to save the family. Ethan was no longer just a rider. He was a student of the beast, preparing for a strategic duel against the legend that haunted his home. The tension ratcheted up as the Grand National Rodeo drew perilously close, transforming the atmosphere on the Iron Star into a pressure cooker. Ethan's internal conflict was now a razor-edge edge between the calculated strategy his father imparted and the raw, visceral fear of that signature left-side spin. He saw the blur of Tornado's massive form in his sleep, and his body was in a constant state of low-grade panic, yet he persisted, training until his muscles screamed and his mind went numb. John's participation became his anchor. The old man, confined to his chair, became a rigorous, silent coach. Using a repurposed piece of lumber, he would tap out the rhythmic sequence of a bull's bucking, and then, with a sharp rap, signal the deadly tornado spin. Ethan had to respond instantaneously, shifting his weight with a counter movement so fast it defied physics. These sessions were exhausting, a silent, intense ballet of trust and terror, played out daily in the dusty barn. The consequences of failure were vivid, always present. Ethan knew that if he mistimed the counterlean by a fraction of a second, the result would be the same devastation that had crippled his father. The external pressures from Mr. Harlan intensified, escalating from mere nuisance to clear economic warfare. Harlan had managed to use his influence to halt a crucial feed delivery, forcing Ethan to spend 2 vital training days traveling 100 miles round trip to procure expensive hay. This was followed by a baseless but distracting complaint filed with the county livestock authority about the McCullough's fencing standards. Harlan wasn't just waiting for them to fail. He was actively tightening the noose, confident that a tired, distracted rider would make the inevitable, fatal error. This malicious behavior galvanized Ethan's determination. He understood Harlan's game, attrition, but Harlan failed to grasp the renewed, unbreakable bond between father and son. John, witnessing Harlan's tactics, communicated his frustration through a furious, detailed drawing of a snake Harlan's emblem. This shared anger further fueled Ethan, making the fight deeply personal. Clara, while still anxious about her brother's physical state, began to perceive the true scope of the crisis. Seeing the predatory actions of Harlan and realizing that a legal, drawn-out fight was unwinnable, her worry softened, morphing into reluctant support. She saw that Ethan's path, however terrifying, was the only clean way out. A true victory that would save the ranch's soul, not just its ledger. Her role shifted to guarding the ranch, running interference against Harlan's interference, providing the space and time Ethan needed to perfect his impossible ride. The motivation was no longer just saving the land. It was defeating the malice of a greedy neighbor and affirming the indomitable spirit of the McCullough family. Ethan knew that when he stepped into the arena, he was carrying the honor of his name, the weight of his father's sacrifice, and the hopes of his sister, transforming the bull right into a high-stakes, all-or-nothing symbolic battle for survival. The atmosphere at the Grand National Rodeo was electric, a confluence of excitement and dread that made the air feel thin and sharp. The climactic final evening was a sensory overload. The powerful, musky scent of livestock, the blinding spotlights, the roar of tens of thousands of people, all culminating in the arrival of the legendary Tornado. The bull was led into the chute, its bulk a solid wall of simmering aggression. Ethan watched from the staging area, his mouth dry, the bull rope feeling coarse and unfamiliar in his sweating palm. He caught a glimpse of Mr. Harlan in the stands, seated with an entourage, a smirk of anticipated victory already plastered on his face. Ethan took a deep breath, reciting the mantra his father had scrawled on the chalkboard. Balance, strategy, left. The moment of truth arrived. He climbed down onto Tornado's back. The bull was a furnace of vibrating muscle, its skin twitching with impatience. Ethan settled in, his focus absolute, his left hand gripping the rope with the strength of desperation and years of suppressed pain. The gate opened with a terrifying shriek of steel. Tornado erupted, a black cyclone tearing into the dirt. The first 4 seconds were pure, unadulterated chaos, a series of bone-jarring, unpredictable vertical bucks designed to shock and disorient. Ethan rode with the precision of a clockmaker, relying on muscle memory honed by weeks of brutal training. Then came the moment of truth. Tornado executed the McCullough killer. The sudden, violent, bone-jarring spin to the left. The crowd's roar dipped, a collective echo of the trauma 5 years past. Ethan felt the familiar, terrifying pull of gravity, the instinct to count and lean to the right to save himself. But he overrode it. Left. He intentionally threw his weight to the inside of the spin, an aggressive, unnatural movement that compensated for the bull's centrifugal force. The crowd gasped as the counterlean neutralized the spin. For a heart-stopping second, Ethan and Tornado were perfectly aligned. The bull's main weapon rendered useless. Tornado, surprised and furious, switched tactics, bucking higher, faster its final, desperate power plays demanding every ounce of Ethan's core strength. Ethan gritted his teeth, his vision tunneling, the world reduced to the rough texture of the rope and the urgent, muffled counting of the announcer. 5.6. He felt his father's steady phantom guidance on his shoulders, the silent communication of a shared strategy. 7. Tornado lunged and spun one last time, a final earth-shaking effort. Ethan held tight, his body screaming in protest. 8. The buzzer shrieked, a triumphant, joyous alarm cutting through the arena's deafening roar. Ethan had done it. He had ridden the impossible. The moment he dismounted, a surge of adrenaline and disbelief rushed through him, a feeling of having conquered not just the bull, but the ghost that had tormented his family for half a decade. The conclusion was a symphony of resolution, starting with the ecstatic chaos in the arena. Ethan, though bruised and winded, was instantly surrounded. The television cameras swarmed, but his eyes were fixed on the stands. Clara was the first to reach him, her face a radiant mask of tears, hugging him with a ferocity that conveyed 5 years of fear and anxiety finally released. The real moment of profound resolution, however, was with his father. As Ethan walked toward John's wheelchair, the older man made a slow, deliberate effort. With incredible difficulty, he lifted his hands, placing them on Ethan's neck, a gesture of pure, unreserved pride and recognition. The weight of the past lifted in that touch. John, unable to speak much, simply nodded, his eyes conveying the message. You finished it. You won. The victory was immortalized moments later when Ethan accepted the oversized check, a tangible symbol of salvation, ensuring the Iron Star would live to see another season. Mr. Harlan, his face etched with a mix of fury and disbelief, was seen storming out of the VIP section, his calculated greed decisively defeated. Back at the ranch, the atmosphere was one of quiet, profound peace. The check was framed and placed above the mantel, not just as a receipt for a debt paid, but as a monument to their resilience. The conflicts were completely resolved. The bank debt was zeroed out, the ranch was secure, and Mr. Harlan's immediate threat was neutralized by the public, undeniable triumph. More importantly, the psychological and emotional scars began to heal. John's silence was replaced by a renewed engagement with the world. He couldn't ride, but he had mentored a champion, and he began to immerse himself in the technical management of the ranch, his intellect sharp and focused. Clara, seeing the family unity restored, put aside her constant worry and began planning the ranch's revitalization. Her business acumen now applied to building a future, not just surviving the present. Ethan's ride was not an end but a beginning. He realized the 8 seconds on Tornado SBAC were less about an act of impossible bravery and more about the power of listening, preparation, and facing his own fear with strategy. The story that will be passed down is not about the bull's power, but the cowboy's wisdom. The Iron Star Ranch was saved because a son listened to the hard-won lesson of his father's failure, transforming a paralyzing past into a victorious future. It was a testament to the enduring truth of the American West, that a legacy is never truly lost if the spirit to fight for it remains. The greatest strength is not brute force, but the courage to learn from the hardest falls. The McCullough family had their ranch, their name, and most importantly, they had each other. United by the memory of the storm, they finally managed to ride out.